with 5 seconds. He's going to throw it. Howard leaps. He has it. Touchdown. Carolina back from the dead to tie the game with 2 seconds to go. Snap back, spot down. The kick is cleanly away. It is good.
And
Nick
it's
Barber with a
Yes, sir.
54-yard field goal. And how about them Tar Heels? They do it.
Here's Kupak. Gives off to Amos. He's got it. He's got it. Unbelievable. Unreal.
Jordan back to kick. It's blocked again. Picked up. It'll be a touchdown, Carolina, for Bracey Walker. He blocked his second punt and scores his second touchdown of the season. It's 14-13. Mr. Jordan meet Mr. Walker.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
This is the Heel Tough Blog Podcast on Spreaker.com.
Welcome in to this edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. I'm Anthony Pagnotta. Thursday was the close to spring camp as the team now turns to Saturday's spring game where they will officially close down spring football in Chapel Hill. We had to talk to two of the Tar Heels' best beat writers about where the team stands and what they're keeping an eye on Saturday, and it starts with Jacob Turner of Tar Heel Illustrated.
Jake, it's been a little while, man, but, I saw you out at the Rivals three-stride camp, and I know we have to get you back on to talk a little Tar Heel football. So first of all, how you doing now? You're getting the focus back towards football, so are you excited that we're back and maybe focusing on the football team a little more than we have in maybe even the last couple of years?
Yeah, man, it's good to be back on here, Anthony. I appreciate you having me on here. It was good to see you at the Rivals camp. I think I speak for both of us when I say that was a fun experience to see some of the top players from, not only North Carolina and South Carolina, but Georgia, Texas, Florida. Those guys from California. It was a really cool event, my first time there. Really awesome experience. But, man, I'm excited for Carolina football to be back. It's something that there's a real buzz around the program. I'm actually on the way back from interviewing some players after Carolina's, I guess, their final spring practice before the spring game on Saturday. And, it's just a different vibe. The players seem excited. Coaches seem excited, especially Mac Brown. And guys just seem to be ready to get back on the field. I know Javonte Williams said today that he was just, he really is really confident in this team. Patrice Renee said the same thing. Antonio Williams said the same thing, that they're really, really confident in what this team can do going forward, and they just feel like they're out. It almost seems like they have a point to prove to go out there and erase the past over the past couple seasons under Fedora and move on from that. So I think, you combine that with the talent that Carolina has, the excitement, and just the Hall of Famer coach and the amazing coaching staff he put together. I think there's a really good buzz around Carolina football right now, and I know the players are excited to get back on the field, but, I'm excited to get back into Kenan Stadium and start covering them again, because I only got to cover I came on to Tar Heel Illustrated late in the season, so I only got to cover about 2 or 3 games last year, man. So I'm really excited to see the football team back out there, and I think it's going to be a really fun event there on Saturday afternoon. And it looks like it's going to be a wet Kenan Stadium, but hopefully that rain holds off.
Yeah, hopefully. But, either way, I think you're right. The mindset around the team really does seem to be different. You said you came on late in the season. What's the difference that you've seen from even certain players, guys probably like Patrice Renee and Antonio Williams, who were there last year and were seen as leaders late in the season? But is there more energy with those guys this year with Mac Brown being there and with a fresh page to start on?
Yeah, that's a good question, Anthony. I think it's there's this quiet confidence amongst the players now. I think I really saw it in Antonio today. He's always been a really positive, happy-going guy. But, obviously with the season they had last year, you didn't really see that as much. And just right now, I know Carolina hasn't played any games under Mac Brown, and you can't really judge this team until they, really even past the season opener against South Carolina. You really can't judge them until, maybe 3/4 of the way through the season next year on what they've been able to do. But there just seems to, Antonio Williams seems a lot more happy, a lot more positive. And like I said, there's this quiet confidence that it's almost really hard to explain if you don't see it firsthand, but guys just seem to be more confident in what they're doing. I think they almost just believe more in what the coaching staff is putting out there because, I mean, Anthony, I know you do a great job covering Carolina football and Carolina athletics in general, but I know you've analyzed the staff and talked about the staff that Mack Brown's hired, and you got a Hall of Fame head coach, and not only do you have that, but I mean the guys and coaching staff that he's brought in, Phil Longo, an offensive coordinator,
right.
Jay Bateman, the defensive coordinator, Tim Brewster's one of the best recruiters in the country, one of the best tight end coaches in the nation. I mean, you just look at those three guys, and those are probably three of the most influential guys, and then you add in Dre Blott, you add in Gillespie at the running back coach, you add in Thigpen, who's had such an amazing career there under Mack Brown as a linebacker. And the players just seem to be so much more confident in what the coaching staff is doing. And I think you have to take that with a grain of salt as well because, like I said, right. Carolina hasn't played a game yet. So we don't really know what to expect from this team. There's still some freshmen that have to come in and get acclimated that will likely have to play some important roles because there is some position that Carolina doesn't have a ton of depth at, especially at that front seven spot on the defense. But there just seems to be this quiet confidence about the guys. They seem to be happy. They seem to be enjoying practice and enjoying this new coaching staff and what they're learning. And I think a lot of that has to do with what the coaching staff has done, trying to instill that confidence in them. But, I mean, like I said, when you're playing under guys like that, it's like it's pretty hard not to be excited and be confident in what you're doing.
Yeah, you talked about it. Every position coach seems to be, relatively storied. One of the guys that I really like that, you didn't mention there is Lonnie Galloway, who I love as a wide receivers coach. I thought that was a fantastic pickup. He's been in so many different types of systems, and people might say, well, what have you done for me lately? Well, he was fantastic at Louisville and has put out some great wide receivers out of there. So I think you're right. This staff is loaded. One of the guys that I really thought they did a great job of keeping on the staff was Robert Gillespie. I really thought he did a great job with the running backs last year, and it kind of got swept under the rug just a little bit because of the overall struggles of the team. But I think you're right. I think that this staff really instills confidence in guys really just based on merit. And, when you talk about Mack Brown, is that something that maybe early in camp or even still late in camp guys talk about, is the fact that he is a Hall of Fame coach, he does have a national title? Is there more confidence because Mack Brown is who he is?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. I mean, I think pretty much every time we've interviewed somebody new at these practices, a new player we haven't talked to in the spring, we've kind of asked them that question of what it's kind of like working under a Hall of Fame guy. And I definitely think it plays a big factor because even recruits have talked about it this past weekend at the Rivals Camp, because I'll ask them about, what is it like being recruited by a Hall of Famer? And, I mean, a guy like Mack Brown, he's won a national championship. Not many guys in football coaches can say that. That's the pinnacle. It's really tough to do. A guy that has not only won a national championship, but has been so successful at Texas and again at App State when he was there for a year, and at Carolina where he's at right now. I think that alone just shows these guys and shows these recruits and whoever it may be, even the players on the team right now, that, hey, if we listen to this guy and we believe in what Mack Brown's doing, he'll get us there because he's done it before. And it's hard when, say you're a guy like Larry Fedora, you haven't, when the biggest thing you've won at Carolina was, that ACC title and that great run they had in 2015. And that was a great year, but it's not the same because it's a guy like Mack Brown who's reached the pinnacle of college football, who's won everything there is to win. So I think it really does play a factor with these kids. I think there's more of a belief in, hey, if we listen to what this guy's doing, if we listen to the staff that he's put together, if we buy in, we can be, a really good football team. And I think that quiet confidence that I talked about, I think it has a lot to do with that. I think it's these guys being confident in what these coaches are preaching, maybe more so than the old staff. I'm not trying to discourage anything the old staff's done or even talk about them. I mean, that's in the past, but it doesn't compare when you compare the old staff to what it is now. So I think that confidence is there, and I think that'll play a huge factor because, I mean, you know how it's in any sport, much less college football, confidence is key, and if you believe in what you're doing, you can really have a successful year. So I'm looking forward to see how that translates on the field Saturday. Obviously, we're not going to get a huge look at anything because you're playing against each other, so you don't really get a great idea of what this team's going to look like. There's still some freshmen that have to come in, like I mentioned earlier, but the confidence is there. Guys seem to be really buying in right now. and hopefully that translates to wins on the field. And I would be shocked right now if it didn't.
Well, I know that you talked to Antonio Williams and Javonte Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those guys are expected to take on some big roles this season. Of course, Javonte finished the year extremely well against Western Carolina and then started the game against State because really just the lack of depth at the position because of injuries. And he's now expected to take on that bigger role, and part of the reason is because Jordan Brown is now gone. When you saw the news about Jordan Brown, I don't think anybody should really be all that shocked. I think it was actually the best move for him because this Tar Heel backfield, it really is loaded this season.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, is it the deepest position on this team right now in spring camp, in your opinion?
I think it might be, Anthony. I think Jordan. I think I tweeted this the day Jordan Brown left. I don't know if you saw it or not, but I tweeted that Jordan Brown, him leaving, like you mentioned, shouldn't really be much of a shock because when you consider the depth at Carolina's backfield, I mean, this is no discredit to Jordan Brown at all, but I mean, he was likely going to be fourth string because what Javonte Williams showed last year, I actually wrote a story about him after the Western Carolina game. That was one of my first stories I wrote for Tar Heel Illustrated. I think that was my first football game I covered. And he was a kid that wasn't highly recruited out of high school that I have to give credit to Fedora and his staff for picking him up. He's an in-state guy who I think he won like 3 state championships. He was just a great player. He was actually planning on coming to Carolina as a student, had like a 4.0 GPA in high school. Wasn't even thinking about playing college football because he just wasn't getting offers at the D1 level. And lo and behold, he comes in and he shows how good he can be. And I talked to him today, and he mentioned the fact that it was kind of a shock that Jordan Brown left. He said that Jordan texted them the night before, I believe, and told him he was transferred. And not a lot of guys expected it in that position group because I had talked to Jordan a few weeks prior, and I talked to Antonio and Michael Carter and Javonte earlier in the season about how much of a leader Jordan Brown was in that backfield because he was one of the most experienced guys. And they talked about how much of a leader he was, and I talked to Jordan about that, and he said he was, trying to lead these guys and just trying to show them the ways of how having to do things. And even Antonio, I mean, he's a senior, but he only been in the program for a year and a half now.
Right.
So Jordan leaving, like I mentioned, I don't think was too much of a shock. I don't think it should be too much of a shock to anybody. I don't think it really hurts Carolina's backfield because, like you mentioned, I do think this is Carolina's deepest position right now. I think you can make cases that maybe some other spot. I think wide receiver is really good right now. And this might be a little, I don't know if people will agree, but I think quarterback's super deep right now. Matt Brown mentioned it last week that he actually went out of his way to say, I would have recruited all 3 of these guys when I was at Texas. That's how talented they are. So I think Carolina is in a really good position on offense. Like I mentioned with the defense, which I'm sure we'll talk about, there's not a ton of depth over there at cornerback, at linebacker, even at the defensive position, at the defensive end and defensive line position. A lot of that has to do with some injuries right now. I think they will be fine when the season starts. But to answer your question, Anthony, I think this team is very deep and probably the deepest at the running back position because there's just a ton of talent. Michael Carter is exceptional. I think he's going to have a really good year. Antonio Williams, a leader, really, really good running back. And then you add Javonte Williams, who's really starting to emerge and getting a lot of praise from guys around him. So running back's looking good right now. And Jordan leaving was disappointing. I think he did some really nice things and, kind of a quiet guy that was a good leader and definitely a good representative of Carolina football. But I can't blame him for leaving because, like I mentioned, I think he was unfortunately going to be fourth string.
Right, and now that fourth string position on the depth chart opens up a little bit. One of the guys to keep an eye on will probably be redshirt sophomore Antoine Branch. He was a guy that came in and was relatively highly recruited, sort of has had some injury problems and is more of a bigger back, so could fit that role down the line. So keep an eye on him potentially at Saturday's game if he does see some reps. But we turn to the defensive side of the football, like you said, and let's start in that defensive backfield because we did lose 2 significant guys in the last couple of weeks. One to transfer in KJ Sales, who will move on. It seems like because of some family health health
Yeah.
issues.
That's what I'm thinking too. Yeah,
that's where I think he's going to go with. I think that's the reason he's moving on. And then C.J. Cottman retires because of recurrent headaches. So I think that was the reason why he was off the field so much last year. Again, we still haven't really gotten any clarification because, as we all know, Larry Fedora and his staff were not very good at keeping us up to date on that kind of stuff. So as journalists, we are still pulling our hair out over some of the injuries that these guys have. But, you know, we lose both of those guys, and then we do have Miles Dorn and Miles Woolfolk at safety, both limited. You know, so right now, first I want to ask you, you know, that cornerback position opposite of Patrice Rene, who is that guy right now? Is it Greg Ross? Has Trey Shaw maybe kind of progressed along? Who is that guy right there? And then also at the safety positions, you know, who are the guys that have emerged? I've heard DJ Ford is one of the guys that's really stepped up.
Yeah, I think at the cornerback position it's really wide open. Patrice Rene is a lock. I think he had a really good season last year, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that a lot of people didn't throw to him because the other side of the field of the cornerback position was so weak. So I think the jury's maybe a little bit still out on Patrice Rene because I think he'll be targeted probably similar to what he was last year because I think he is the most talented guy. So he's probably not going to be targeted a ton. But I think Patrice Rene is really locked down that position. But like you mentioned, Anthony, I don't really know right now. I think Greg Ross and Trey Shaw are the two guys because, I mean, I was at open practice a couple weeks ago, and they literally have like 5 cornerbacks. So there's not a ton of depth right now there, and it's unfortunate. But it's going to be up to Greg Ross or Trey Shaw stepping up. Obviously, Greg Ross got some reps last year, and I'm not no knock on Greg Ross, but he didn't have a great year at the end of the year last year. He was really, really targeted and really, really taking advantage of a lot. But you can't really judge him off that because Carolina's defense and, unfortunately, the team as a whole was just not very good at all. So I right now I'd have to say I think it's going to be up between Shaw and Ross. But for me, I don't know. I don't think anybody's really pulled themselves or made themselves more of a starter right now between those two guys. So I think that'll be one of the key things to watch at the spring game. I know you can't really get a ton out of spring games like I mentioned, but it'll be interesting to see who maybe is running with that first-team defense if that's how they decide to do it. I'm assuming we'll see a first-team defense out there at some point. I know some of the rules for the spring game are a little bit different this year, which I couldn't even go into explaining right now because, honestly, I don't even understand some of it right now. But I think at that cornerback position, it's going to be a battle between those guys, like I mentioned. Right now, I'd probably give the nod to Greg Ross because he did get some good, decent reps last year. And some guys have been talking about him doing some nice things. I think Trey Morrison's mentioned him. Patrice Rene's mentioned him a few times. So Greg Ross right now is probably going to get that nod, but that position's still way up in the air. And at the safety position, Anthony, you did mention Miles Dorn and Miles Woolfolk being out. Miles Dorn had surgery last week, and he's been at practice. Saw him at practice today in a red jersey. So I think he's doing some things. He was suited up, I believe. So he's doing some things very light. I highly doubt you'll see him in the spring game. Miles Woolfolk's had a yellow jersey on most of spring practice, which means he's limited as well. But I think at safety position, those two guys I think that position's pretty locked in with those two guys. I think you have two really talented safeties that have some experience there, especially with Miles Dorn. But I was thinking maybe potentially we'd see Trey Morrison get a shot, but we talked to him on Tuesday, and he said he's running predominantly pretty much that nickel position. So maybe you'll see him get mixed in there a little bit because I think he's more than capable of doing that. DJ Ford's a guy that's emerged and done some nice things. I would like to see Javon Terry get a shot there. He's be a sophomore this year. I think maybe a redshirt freshman. I don't know off the top of my head. I believe he'll be a redshirt freshman this year. But he actually went to Wake Forest High School, where I went to high school. Played with the likes of Dexter Lawrence, Bryce Love when he was a little bit younger. Won state. I think he won at least 2 state championships when he was there. And was a really talented 3-star guy out of Wake Forest. That school's produced some of the best players and some of the top players over the past few years. But I think Javon Terry's a little banged up right now, so I don't know if we'll see him in the spring game. I'm not 100% sure on that right now. But like I said, unfortunately at that position right now, you've got 2 of your most experienced guys out, and I think that's definitely going to play a factor. So don't look into that too much at the spring game because, like I said, you're just most likely not going to have Dorn out there at all. And Woolfolk, I'm not sure if you're going to see him because of how limited he is. So it could be some interesting things at safety during the spring game. But at the same time, that's good for the likes of DJ Ford and for the likes of other guys that are trying to step up back there and get some playing time, because one thing I've noticed about DJ Ford too, man, is his body type. He's like a 6'3", super lengthy guy. He looks like a safety. And Javon Terry as well is a pretty big kid too. So those two guys, when I saw them in open practice, I looked at those, Ford and Terry, and was like, those are two guys that look like Division I ACC caliber safeties with their body size. So if they can just figure things out, continue to improve, I think Carolina next year is going to need those guys to step up even more, because like I mentioned, I think Dorn and Woolfolk pretty much have those spots locked down if they can stay healthy, which has been a problem for those two guys, unfortunately, over the past few seasons.
Yeah, you're right about that. Now, where is Bryson Richardson? Is he in the nickel, or is he
I believe so, yeah. I believe he's been running with the nickel when I saw him. He's another guy I did forget to mention. Good catch on that one, Anthony. I believe he was recruited as a safety. So I think he'll maybe get some reps back there, especially at the spring game. But if I'm not mistaken, when I saw him at open practice, he was running a lot at that nickel position, which I think is a good position for him. He's kind of reminds me of Trey Morrison. He's a heavy hitter, big kid, a lot of energy, who I think is going to be a really good player as well. But that's another thing to keep an eye on. I would not be surprised to see him getting some reps at safety with all the injuries Carolina has there during the spring game on Saturday.
Well, you mentioned the nickel position, and just really quickly, there still is going to be a significant amount of nickel and even probably 4 cornerbacks on the field at a time in this system, right? I think a lot of people feel that with the 3-4 system, we're going to run a 3-4 base at all times. That's with the way today's game is set up, where it's more pass-based, we're still going to see a lot of nickel corner out there, right?
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of nickel, especially the fact that Trey Morrison is getting no other reps anywhere else really besides nickel kind of shows you how important that position is, with the lack of, just the lack of depth Carolina has at cornerback and safety right now. So I think that speaks volumes. I think the nickel is going to be a very important position, and having a guy like Trey Morrison back there is huge, because we all know the season he had last year in a pretty miserable season for Carolina. He was the shining light. So, yeah, Anthony, to answer your question, I think you're going to see a lot of that nickel position for Bateman and his defense.
And then let's look up front, because as you mentioned, the front seven is really going through some things depth-wise. Part of that is because they do have so many injuries. The defensive line in particular, guy like Jason Strobridge out, who has been just such a huge leader for this team over the last couple of years and has grown into really one of the better players. Tyrone Hopper and Alan Cater, two guys that unfortunately will now have to wait until fall to figure out where they fit in, whether or not they're going to stand up or put their hand in the dirt. And then you got Jonathan Smith, one of the leaders at linebacker, who's out. But there are some guys that have stepped up, and Jeremiah Gemmel at the linebacker position, he looks like he might be the guy that steps in and takes over for Cole Holcomb. And then on the defensive line, there are some younger guys who are emerging. Zach Gill, I think, has seen a little bit more of an expanded role. So look out for him, and maybe even another guy like Jake Lawler. So when you look at those positions right there, first of all, how concerned should people be with the depth, and who are some of those names that are stepping forward that could ease some of those concerns as we go along?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think right now, Matt Brown mentioned it last week, that he was talking about the lack of depth of the D-line right now. But the main reason he said that is he said, I'm not considering any of the guys that are out right now because I've never seen them play.
Right.
So in reality, Carolina's depth at that line, if everybody's healthy, should be fine. I mean, we saw Carolina's D-line last year at times. I tweeted it a few times. I thought Carolina's defensive line in some games last year was one of the best top defensive lines in the ACC. I thought they did some really nice things. Cater started to emerge.
Right.
Strobridge was really a dominant force that started to emerge and do some really nice things towards the end of the year. Obviously, losing Malik Coney's a big miss for this Carolina defense, because he was a leader and a really, really good player who's gonna make some really good money at the next level here coming up soon. But I think having Strobridge back in the fall is going to be huge. I think Cater's going to do some nice things. And I've interviewed Jake Lawler a few times this year, and I don't know why he hasn't seen the field more, because he is just a big kid. He looks like a Division I ACC caliber D-end. Right. He's a very smart kid as well. So I think you're going to see him get some more playing time. I think he's a guy that could really emerge at that defensive line position. But like you mentioned, I think Strobridge and Cater are two of the biggest. Hopper also had a really good year last year. So I wouldn't be too concerned at the defensive line come the first game of the year next year in August, late August.
Right.
I wouldn't be too worried if everybody can get healthy and get back out there, because I think there's some serious talent down there. I mean, Aaron Crawford guys have been talking about him like crazy. Nick Foligno actually spoke about him on Tuesday. He's like, I've gone up against him for 5 years now, and he actually made a point of saying that I play games against guys all the time that don't even compare to Crawford and how good he is. We didn't get to see Crawford at all last year, really. Maybe 5-10 snaps total with all the injuries he had.
Yeah,
so
it took 10 snaps
that's
the whole
another
year.
huge pickup for them. And sorry to cut you off, Anthony, but at the linebacker position as well, that probably is my biggest concern. I know you probably know the lack of depth right there. I mean, unfortunately, I think Gemmel has done a really nice job and stepped up. I've heard he's been calling a lot of the plays on the defensive side of the ball as well. So I think that kind of shows how much he has emerged kind of as that, middle linebacker type guy. But, I mean, besides that, it's extremely thin. Chaz Surratt, I think, has done some nice things. But the unfortunate part is when you're probably your second best linebacker right now, but with not considering Jonathan Smith, it sounds like he's going to be back on the team when it starts. I know some people have talked to him, and he seems pretty confident he's going to be back out there come fall. But that's still up in the air. Who knows if he'll get his grade straight and be able to play again. And if you take him away from that team, I mean, who do you have? You have a Gemmel who played a little bit last year, and you got Chaz Surratt who's making a move from quarterback to linebacker.
Right.
So, like I said, I think the linebacker is the most – even Mac Brown's admitted he's a little bit worried about the D-line. I think that's more because he hasn't seen a lot of his most talented guys play, understandable. But that linebacker position it does scare me because that's one of the most important positions on any defense, much less a Jay Bateman defense. I think it becomes that much more important. So that position I'm really worried about. I'm hoping Gemmel continues to make strides. I'm hoping Surratt is as good as people are making him out to be. And I'm really hoping that Jonathan Smith gets back into school. I mean, I know he hasn't done a ton in his time here, but he has experience. He has done some decent things. So linebacker position, to sum it up for you, jury's really still out on that. I'm not too confident in that even going into the season. That guys are really going to have to improve and might even have to rely on some guys coming in to play some minutes. But D-line, I wouldn't be too worried about that if everybody can get back healthy, which I don't think will be a problem.
Well, that's good to hear. And, yeah, the linebacker position, this was kind of the wrong year to have to go to the 3-4. Of course, we want Jay Bateman's defense to be able to flow the way that it's supposed to, but you mentioned it. I mean, this year we just don't know if we're going to have that depth. I know Timon Fox is standing up now. He's pretty much going to be a 3-4 outside linebacker to its truest. I think Tyrone Hopper, will probably stand up too because he was converted from linebacker earlier in his career. So I would be really shocked if he ends up putting his hand down. So having him back will definitely help. And then, I think Matthew Flint's a guy that we've heard a little bit about. It's just kind of where does he fit because he came in as an outside linebacker in Fedora's 4-3 scheme, or, John Papuchis' 4-3 scheme, but basically Fedora's. And then, and now he's kind of, I would guess he's going to move inside. And we've heard some things. Right. We've heard some things about him and how he's performed. Another big guy that we lost this offseason that guys won't talk about is Malik Robinson, who really had a great year in spring camp last year. He ended up actually transferring. So I think you're right. Just the amount of bodies, there's just not a whole lot of guys there. And I think you're saying it, the door could be open for a fall enrollee like Eugene Asante, who is really talented to come in and make an early impact, pretty much immediately. I mean, he could be on the field in that game against South Carolina if he really shows enough to us. I guess one last thing that I'll ask you, we're focusing on the game on Saturday. What are you really going to be focusing on? I'm assuming the quarterback battle is probably the top thing that everybody's focusing on. But what are some of the other under-the-radar things that maybe you should focus on out there, or maybe some key players to keep an eye on?
It's a good question. I think Corey Bell at that wide receiver position, I haven't seen – obviously he made that move from – what was he – corner to wide receiver here recently. Yep. And we spoke to him last week, and he said he hadn't played wide receiver since middle school. That being said, I mean, the amount of praise he has got from just about everybody we talked to since that move is unbelievable. So I am really excited to see what he does. There is some – I've also heard – I think Matt Brown said it last week that you're likely going to see Toe Groves, Corey Bell, and Daz Newsome as the three punt returners and kick returners. So the fact that Corey Bell has emerged as one of those guys in that quick of a time kind of shows me how well he's adjusted. So Corey Bell is a guy I really, really am excited to have an eye on, because Carolina doesn't have a lot of those short slot receiver guys besides Daz Newsome, really.
Right.
And he's the guy that can slot right in there and get some significant minutes. So the reason I say him is because of the amount of praise he's been getting. Obviously, the quarterback position's a huge battle right now. Nobody's really emerged, which I don't think should be as a surprise to anybody. But like I said, I think that position's in good hands because you've got three talented guys.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, even Mac Brown's admitted it. You're going to lose one of those guys probably in the coming year or so, because any of those guys could probably start at a lot of schools in the ACC. So you're unfortunately probably going to lose your third string guy, whoever that may be. So I would definitely keep an eye on quarterback position, just because we haven't been able to talk to any quarterbacks this spring. We haven't really gotten anything from Mac Brown of huge significance on the quarterback. So definitely keep an eye on that. And I think besides that, keep an eye on that front seven on the defensive line and at the linebacker position. I'd really encourage people to watch that, because, like I said, you're going to see a lot of these D linemen that are going to be playing on Saturday, probably not playing as much with the talent that's coming back when the spring, when the real season starts in late August against South Carolina. So keep an eye on those two positions, especially that defense, because unfortunately it became a staple under Larry Fedora that the defense just was really never good. Even in 2015 when we had a really, really good year, Gene Chizik back there coaching them up. I mean, Carolina's defense was still let up a ton of yards. So hopefully they can get that turned around, especially with Bateman, what he did with, I wouldn't say a lack of talent in Army, but with smaller guys, definitely a little bit lack of talent. The fact that he was able to turn them around and have such a top, I think it was the top 5 or top 10 defense in the country last year, shows that I think he can do it here and should be able to. But I'm trying to think of another guy that I would definitely look out for. I think another big player that I'm really excited to see, and maybe a position group which you've already talking about, is that running back position. Because my thing is, obviously in this air raid style, Phil Longo still likes to use and use those running backs a lot, and out of the backfield as catchers as well. I think they're all three very capable of that. But having a young, experienced quarterback coming in, regardless of who it's going to be, they're all three basically going to be freshmen. 2 are going to be redshirt freshmen that have some experience, and you got a true freshman in Sam Howell. If you can establish a dominant running game, just imagine how much pressure that's going to take off those quarterbacks. So I think keep an eye on those guys. It'll be interesting to see who runs with the starting group. I would assume it might be Antonio. I'm assuming it could be Michael. I really don't know. I think that's a toss-up right now. You can start either of those guys and be successful, in my opinion. So keep an eye on that running back group too. But I think my biggest guy, to answer your question, the guy I'm really excited to see the most is Corey Bell. And like I said, it's because of the amount of praise he's been receiving. It's just been unbelievable, Anthony. Everybody seems to talk about him. And we haven't been able to see him play. We were in the open practice. I should have kept an eye on him more, but I didn't. They were just doing small drills, so you really can't get an idea of how good he is anyway.
Right.
But having not been able to see a scrimmage, and this being the first time we've seen these guys being able to go up against each other, that's the guy I'm really excited to see, because, like I said, the way he's been being talked up, how seamless and smooth that transition's been for him in practice, that can translate into the game. I mean, he's just going to add a ton of depth to that wide receiver position that already really has a ton of depth anyway. So I'm really excited for the spring game on Saturday. It's going to be a good time, a lot of fun events out there. There's just, a new coaching staff is always going to bring a new aura, but when you bring Mac Brown back, I don't know how many people are going to be at that game, especially with how bad the weather's looking, but I think if it was going to be a beautiful day like it is today and, 70 degrees and sunny, it would be a really good turnout. But there's a lot of things to keep your eye on during the spring game. A lot of things are still up in the air, but those are the guys and positions that I would definitely be watching personally, and I think everybody else should focus on as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was fantastic. That's exactly where I'm looking as well. One of the other guys I'd throw out there is, if you're a guy that's into the offensive lineman, keep an eye on Ed Montilus, who has taken over a starting role. So,
I forgot to mention that, Anthony. That's a good point. I forgot to mention how deep this O-line is, too. I think the O-line is one of the deepest positions as well. Montilus has emerged. I wrote a little feature story on him. I think last week. He's really emerged and is getting a ton of praise. And this O-line is deep. Polino, he's got so many guys down there that can do some really good, really, really good things. So that's a good point, too. Keep an eye on that O-line, because I think that's one of the deepest positions on Carolina's team right now.
Yeah, so I think that we'll be, of course, keeping an eye on all of that out there at the spring game. It starts at 5 o'clock on Saturday. There are some different things that you can do beforehand. I know there's a women's lacrosse game, a men's lacrosse game, and also a softball game on campus. But if you're one of those real football nuts, or if you're like us and cover the team, you're going to be there at 4:15 when warm-ups begin to make sure that you get an eye on all of the guys who will be out there. And it should be a fun event. I know it is, I mean, as you said, it will rain a little bit. That doesn't stop us. Hopefully it doesn't stop the fan base from coming out and supporting this team. I think that, with the energy that's around this team, the fans need to come out and support them, and we'll see what type of turnout we have for this first spring game. Actually, the first spring game in 3 years, because remember, with everything that's gone on in Kenan Stadium, of course, 2 years ago, they were installing the drainage system, so they were unable to have the game there, and they was that the year I don't think they had it. Maybe it was that year that they had it at Fetzer Field, and then of course last year they didn't have it all together, really just because Fetzer wasn't there. They were tearing that down as they began construction on the new indoor practice facility, and Kenan Stadium was actually just pretty much torn to shreds. So this will be the last time that the team will also be on the grass. So if you love the Kenan Stadium grass, make sure you turn out and check that out for the last time this season before they move to turf. So, Jacob, hey, thanks for joining me, man. Just tell the guys where they can follow you, because you do such a great job. We want to make sure that everybody is following you and making sure that they're staying up to date on everything Carolina football.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Anthony. Really admire what you're doing over, at your blog, Tar Heel South. It's the way you've gone about starting something like that, and the professionalism and all the content you put out is unbelievable. So keep that up over there, man. But definitely follow me on Twitter at Jacob Turner THI. Once again, that's at Jacob Turner THI. You can find me there. Definitely check us out at Tar Heel Illustrated. It's northcarolina.rivals.com. I believe you can type in tarheelillustrated.com and it'll take you straight there. But definitely encourage you guys to check us out over there. Obviously, you can have some coverage of the stuff. You can find coverage of my Twitter account. I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure we can live tweet the game, so I'll be doing some relatively live tweeting and some observations on my Twitter as well. And definitely check out my YouTube account as well. You can find a link to that on my Twitter. I'll go ahead and tweet that right after this. Got a ton of interviews up there. You can find all the interviews with the players. You can find some highlights from the Rivals camp, some interviews with some recruits from the Rivals camp, and a ton of stuff from basketball as well. So, like I said, Anthony, I appreciate you having me back on. Keep up the good work over there, man. We'll have to get back on the podcast very soon.
All right. Yeah, appreciate those words of kindness so much, man. And you're right. We definitely have to get you back on because you do such a fantastic job. And, just during the summer, we'll have to have you on when we're getting that little downtime to talk a little bit of Tar Heel football to keep everybody from going nuts. So, thank you. Forward to it. Yeah, thanks so much, man. We'll see you out there on Saturday. And, just take care, and we'll talk to you down the line, buddy, okay?
Thanks, Anthony. Have a good one, man.
All right, you too, man.
Jacob Turner wasn't the only Tar Heel journalist to stop by on Thursday, though, as we sat down with GoHeels.com's Pat James to talk about some similar storylines and also ask him a few other questions.
Pat, first of all, you're back now covering pretty much almost exclusively Tar Heel football. You're dabbling in some of the other spring sports that they've got going on, but football now becomes a little bit of the focus because of basketball being off the table. So how you doing, man? I know it's been it's kind of been all over the place here over the last couple of months, but now it's sort of time to settle in and focus a little bit on football.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's a fun time of the year right now. I mean, there's definitely, especially this spring, a lot of excitement just around obviously what's been going on with the football program, and it's been fun to be over there and everything. And I've been around a little bit of baseball, a little bit more these past couple weeks, and looking forward to being over there a little bit more down the stretch run here.
Yeah, so with the football team, though, they're coming down the stretch run of spring camp. So today was the final practice. Now they'll turn around and have the spring game in Kenan Stadium on Saturday. So with this team, I know one of the main things that a lot of people around the team have talked about is the fact that really just the spirits are totally different for this team. But we talked about it last year that the team really did seem rejuvenated for what would eventually turn out to be Larry Fedora's final year. What's different about this year's team and just the feel around it?
There definitely is. I mean, the phrase everybody tosses around when you have, your coaching staff and all that is, just that these guys are bought in. That's what's always said. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is kind of a renewed commitment, I would say, in a sense, just kind of throughout the entire program. I mean, I think just when you have a coaching change just in general, I mean, there is just an added sense of excitement. I feel like, these guys also kind of feed off the excitement that the fans are also showing currently just in the program. So it does seem like just overall there is just a renewed energy just around the entire program in general. A lot of guys like Antonio Williams, Patrice Renee, they spoke with the media today, and they just said, just the way things are going right now, and everybody is, locked in. I mean, they're really excited for Saturday for the spring game and everything.
Yeah, so one of the main storylines, I think, for the spring game really is the fact that there isn't a whole lot of depth on the defensive side of the football. That's one of the concerns that Mack Brown's been talking about throughout spring camp, and it's become more and more evident over the last couple of weeks with, of course, KJ Sales transferring and then CJ Cotman retiring due to a medical issue. So, when you look at the defensive side of the football, what is the area that right now should have the most concern and people will probably be keeping an eye on the most come Saturday?
I mean, the one that Mack Brown has most recently pointed out is, just the front seven in general. Mm-hmm. And I would say specifically just that linebacker unit. I mean, obviously right now, Jonathan Smith hasn't been practicing this spring, and they've been out without a few guys up there along the front seven. So the linebackers are definitely going to be an area to be watching for, and really just that front seven in general. Personally, I'm really excited to be watching some of these younger guys in that linebacker unit, how they do on Saturday. Guys like Matthew Flint, Kadri Jackson. Matthew Flint's a guy whose name's popped up a couple times in the past couple of days. You guys have been talking about just, his steady progression. He's a guy who impressed a lot during the fall as well when he came as a freshman this past fall. So that's one guy I'm looking for. Just that linebacker unit. Some of those guys on the defensive front, it's be interesting to see, how reps are kind of split up there and everything. I mean, a guy who I'm really curious of watching on Saturday as well is going to be Zach Gill, a guy who's kind of going to be thrust into the middle a little bit there. The Jason Strobridge currently injured.
Yeah, so I think you're right about that. And when you talk about guys like Jason Strobridge and Alan Cater, Tyrone Hopper, those guys are all out. In the secondary, there's two guys in Miles Dorn and Miles Woolfolk. Now, I know that Miles Dorn recently had surgery, so it's probably doubtful that he's going to play in the spring game. What about Miles Woolfolk? Will he be able to go in the spring game, or will we have to see maybe a guy like DJ Ford step up?
I'm not exactly sure about Miles Woolfolk's status for Saturday, but I will say that if DJ Ford is out there, I'm assuming he will be, that's the guy who I'm really curious about, just in terms of his overall development. A guy who, like a few guys on this team has kind of, fought the injury bug during his UNC career, but he's a guy who I know a lot of guys have been impressed with so far this spring. And obviously, with his length, I mean, he's a guy who, if he can figure out how to use that length to his advantage, could be a really exciting player to watch, just in terms of his development.
Let's quickly go to the offensive side of the ball. And, the running back position seems like the most stable out of all of them. Now, Jordan Brown, of course, did leave the program last week to transfer, but that was something that I think all of us eventually expected. At least one of those guys out of those four would probably move on because of just how much depth they have there. With him leaving, is there any concern right now, or is this group really in probably the best shape of any on this entire football team?
I think that's safe to say that this position group is in the best shape. I mean, Antonio Williams and Michael Carter, what you have in those two guys, just, as veterans, just in that running back room. And I mean, obviously, the guy who's been turning heads once again, as he has since he arrived last January, is Javonte Williams. I mean, he's been amazing this spring. I mean, everybody's been talking about him. And so, Antonio Williams was actually talking about him today. Just was talking about just how proud he is of Javonte, how much he's been progressing. He said, he's so excited to see what Javonte is going to be able to do once him and Michael kind of move on, which one might guess would be as early as next year for Michael as well. And then another guy, I mean, who doesn't get a whole lot of publicity, but who I think is an interesting, fourth option is British Brooks. I mean, he's a guy who, obviously not really going against the top tier guys on that defense when he's in there in practice and everything. But he's a guy who I know a lot of guys are big fans of. And he's a guy who could be a good, fourth option for this team.
Yeah, very interesting name to throw into there. I think Antoine Branch as well could be another guy that might be an interesting name to watch out for. When you look at the quarterback position, right now there's still not a whole lot of clearance, although Daz Newsome gave us something interesting a couple of weeks ago when he did say that he thought that Cade Fortin was the smartest out of the group. I don't really know how much you take away from it, but when it comes to Saturday's game, how do you think the reps are going to go? I know that Sam Howell has kind of been that guy that's looked at as the third guy in the race right now, while the other two have kind of stepped their game up, but it's still pretty early for him. Do you expect there to be really more balance, or do you expect it to be like that last scrimmage that we saw where it'll pretty much be Fortin and Reuter taking the bulk of the snaps and then Howell at the end?
I think it will be about as even as possible with the snaps with the three of them. That's just what I would assume. And even then, I mean, even though, as you said, Howell might have been kind of, I guess, the third option in the last scrimmage, it'd be kind of, really close cutting it between the three of them, even just in terms of number of reps. All of them have really been receiving throughout the spring. You mentioned, Kay. I mean, Daz really talked him up a couple weeks ago, and Jeremiah Gemmel had a lot of nice things to say about him earlier this week as well. Just talking about, he throws a really good ball, and that when he misses, he misses long. He doesn't miss short, to where, balls can be picked off and things like that. And so, I mean, he's definitely been talked up a lot, but I think that, it's going to be interesting on Saturday. I think the one thing that it's going to be hard for fans not to do, and even reporters or anybody, is to kind of overreact to what happens on Saturday.
Right.
It's going to be kind of tough for everybody, I think. But I think it'll be interesting to see. I think with the quarterbacks, what I'm most interested in seeing is what they look like the first day of August camp. Because there was a big difference last year with Cade, and he came in, had a pretty solid spring. But in my opinion, I thought Jace was ahead of him at the end of spring practice last year. But when fall camp resumed last fall, I thought Cade had taken huge steps just over the summer. And so I think the summer period is going to be really interesting for those three guys.
Well, the overreaction business is what makes the journalism business. So unfortunately, we got to do it a little bit. Now, I don't think these are overreactions. Two guys that have really stood out on the offensive side of the ball so far in spring camp, both Corey Bell Jr., who made the transition from corner about midway through, and then Ed Montilus, the offensive lineman, who now is projected as the starting left guard. So both of those guys, I mean, should we see some significant reps out of both of those guys on Saturday?
I would imagine so. I mean, Corey Bell's a guy who I think has most been working with, the second team, I guess, putting that in air quotes. But he's a guy who's definitely been super impressive so far. I mean, as impressive as you can be, when you've been playing cornerback for, 7 years, hasn't played wide receiver since middle school. But he's been super impressive. I think he's a guy who, if I am looking in terms of guys who I'm looking forward to watching on Saturday, he's definitely towards the top of the list. And then Montilus, I mean, a lot of guys have been giving him a lot of love. And I mean, he was a guy who kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit last year, coming in out of Apopka High School as well as William Barnes. A lot of attention went to William Barnes. But Montilus, he's definitely been making a name for himself. One of those guys who's kind of taking advantage of having that fresh start with a new coaching staff. And so I definitely am looking forward to see how he performs on Saturday. I think it's going to be interesting to see just kind of how that offensive line in general kind of shapes up. Once J.J. McCarr goes fully healthy and everything again.
And then the last thing that I want to ask you, and we asked you this last year during spring camp, and I think it was one of those questions that was kind of interesting. Which battle do you think is not being talked about quite that much, but will be an interesting one to keep an eye on Saturday? Because everybody wants to talk about the quarterback battle, even the number 2 cornerback battle. So is there one that really maybe we're not looking at that you think could be on display on Saturday and really start to generate a little bit of buzz?
That's kind of interesting because, obviously, I think those two that you mentioned, quarterback and the number 2 cornerback spot, are definitely the ones that are receiving the most attention. It's kind of tough because, the one spot I would say, honestly, it's going to be hard, though, because Jonathan Smith isn't out there. But the guy who I'm really interested in watching is Jeremiah Gemmel. And he's a guy who I think I talked up a lot to you on this podcast back in the fall. And he's a guy who I've really been impressed by. I know the coaching staff really likes him. The one thing is that they've really been wanting from him more is be a little bit more vocal. But and he's a guy who, just kind of depending on what happens. I mean, he's been projected to be the starter at the Mike so far throughout the spring with Jonathan Smith out, and I think he's a guy, if he can continue capitalizing just on these extra reps that he's been getting this spring, when Jonathan Smith's been out, and he's a guy who'd probably be, the starter there, the Mike linebacker. So I think that's the guy. I mean, it's kind of hard for me to say a specific position about, but I think he's a guy who, if he shows enough on Saturday, could put himself in a really good, put himself in the driver's seat for that spot, entering the fall.
Well, there you go. We'll take that because there might be a position battle in the fall because of how he performed in the spring. So we'll definitely take that. That is fantastic stuff from you, Pat. And thanks for stopping by with us, man. I know it's been a little while, and I know we missed you on the podcast. So thanks for swinging by and talking to us a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Look forward to doing it again here soon.
Yeah, just tell the people where they can follow you just in case they're not following you on social media already, which if you're not, you got to make sure you follow this guy because he's one of the best. Him and Lee Pace, man, tag team in the football team, they do such a great job.
Yeah, you can just follow me at PatJames24.
All right, so Pat James from GoHeels.com stopping by with us. Hey, Pat, thank you so much, man, and we'll have to talk to you down the line again, definitely during fall camp, so we can get some of the latest on all of these guys that we just talked about and get ourselves prepared for the season. I mean, believe it or not, it really is closing in. It's only a little more than 4 months away. So for you football nuts, hang in there. So we're almost there. We're almost there. And Saturday will be a little bit of a relief for us. So Pat, thanks again, man. And we'll talk to you down the line, buddy. Okay?
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you very much.
I want to thank both Jacob Turner and Pat James for stopping by to talk about these major storylines ahead of Saturday's spring game in Kenan Stadium. Now, as you heard from Jacob Turner, there is expected to be a little bit of rain in the forecast, but it looks like there's at least a chance that most of the major stuff will hold off. So if you can make it out there, I know the Tar Heel players would love to see you out there, and if you are out there, stop by and say, hey, I'll be sitting in the stands, and I'll let you guys know on game day where I'll be sitting at. How can you find that out? Well, just go to Twitter and search Anthony Pagnotta or my handle at Future Tar Heel, and you'll find me there. Also, check out the blog's Twitter page at Heel Tough Blog on Twitter. You can also head over to Facebook where we have the Facebook page Heel Tough Blog on Facebook. So, you guys know where you can find the podcast. It's on Spreaker, iTunes, Google Play, now Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn.com, or the TuneIn app. Also, just about any other place that you find your podcast will have the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Make sure that you check out the Heel Tough Blog on the website. The Heel Tough Blog is now on its own website, as you guys may know or may not know. And you can also subscribe to the newsletter at the bottom of the homepage. Just search Heel Tough Blog on Google, or you can type it into your address bar, www.heeltoughblog.com. That's the easiest way to do it again, www.heeltoughblog.com. And that will catch you up on all of the latest around Tar Heel football. And if you go to the podcast page, you can find the podcast there as well if you want to listen through the site. Also, we encourage you to check out the Roy's Boys podcast, which is on just about all of those same sites, but still taking a little bit of time to get on some of those other sites as it goes through sort of the approval process. But you can check it out. I know it's definitely on Spreaker, iTunes, Google Podcast, I think, does have it. Spotify and iHeartRadio definitely have it as of the moment. Also, you can search the Roy's Boys blog. That's going to be through Medium.com, where the Heel Tough blog used to be. So you can go ahead and go on there and search that up. Written by our co-host on this show for most of the episodes, and my buddy Josh Marlowe. So, once again, thank both Pat James and Jacob Turner, and thank you guys for listening, and as always, go Tar Heels!